Randi Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, is in the news this week, under attack on Twitter. I mean, X. Ugh, I will never get used to calling it X. Anyway, she is under attack on X. And you might be wondering why, or maybe you don't really care, but I'm going to tell you anyway. She's under attack because she shared an article about homeschoolers. And you know what? We didn't like it. Hey, I'm Anna with Real Mom Homeschooling, and on my channel, I share my commentary about news articles about homeschooling, as well as some free unit studies and activities you can do with your kids, field trips and parks reviews, and a little bit of comedy sprinkled in. So I went down a rabbit hole this week, and I'm going to take you with me because, you know, what's the fun of going down a rabbit hole if you don't I guess pull people along with you. So I had actually never heard of Randi Weingarten, but it popped up in my news feed today about some comments that she had made and some things that she had posted on X. So she had shared an article by Axios and immediately got a ton of comments replying to that, and she shut that down, which of course, you know, fueled the controversy. And then she doubled down on what she said. And so I was really curious because her first post was just sharing the article from Axios. And so I clicked on that article, which that article was then based off of some research that the Washington Post had done. And so I clicked on that article and read that article and a few other things. So I will link everything that I mentioned in this video below. But I want to talk about these two articles because with all the things that has been written about and talked about with homeschooling, at this point, it kind of feels like if you don't understand why people are homeschooling, then you are just refusing to understand. So I want to talk through a couple of the articles, and then I want to share with you a really shocking comment that Randi Weingarten said in an interview. So I grew up homeschooled. My mom started homeschooling me in the first grade, and then and that was in kind of like late 80s, early 90s, back when it was super weird to be homeschooled, when you literally just like hoped that nobody would ask you where you went to school because people were like, what is homeschooling? So many people didn't know about it, and it was just viewed as something really strange. And like one of the articles says, fringe, very fringe. And so I grew up in that era all the way to now. I'm homeschooling my own kids. And I love that when people ask them, where do you go to school? They can just say, oh, I'm homeschooled, and it's no big deal. I love it. So homeschooling has grown a ton. And so the Washington Post did an article where they surveyed 32 states. And the districts that they covered about 60% of the student population in the United States. So they got a huge sample size of just understanding how homeschooling was growing in the country and potentially why it was growing. They found that it was growing very fast in Florida. Big surprise there. Florida is a very homeschooling friendly state. But it also was growing in the Bronx, in New York, which is not a very homeschooling friendly state. So it was interesting to see in that article that across politics, geography, and demographics, that homeschooling is growing, and it's growing very rapidly compared to public school and private school. And so, so they explored a little bit some of the reasons why, and it was interesting. A couple of the interesting things that I found was, one, they found no correlation between the quality of the school district and the growth of homeschooling in that school district. So even very, very good, highly rated school districts still had a lot of growth in homeschoolers. And then the article suggested reasons as to why homeschooling was growing. They cited bullying, school shootings, politics, unmet expectations for special needs programs, and just bad experiences in general. Now, while all of these things, you know, have an element of truth, I'm sure there's a lot of homeschoolers that could identify with some of those reasons. I think it really missed the overarching reasons as to why people homeschool. And it's so frustrating to see these big articles that just totally miss the mark. So moving on from the Washington Post article, the Axios article was, you know, kind of regurgitating some of the same stuff, but they had a few different things. And some of the things that they talked about were more in the negative, you know, talking about how, you know, homeschoolers are more insulated and not exposed to as many people who are different than them. And while you could make that case to a certain degree, as someone who grew up homeschooled, I would totally disagree with that. I feel like I, over the years, had a lot of exposure to different people. Also, just being exposed to people who are different than you does not make you a kind person. And we know that because there's a lot of bullying that happens in schools. One of the other complaints about homeschooling in the Axios article was that the requirements are different for homeschoolers. So saying that homeschoolers are not required to have certain subjects, like social studies or civic requirements, which is true. There's a lot of states that give a lot of freedom to homeschoolers, and we have fought hard for that. I'm so thankful for how many homeschoolers have fought to have freedom in how we educate our children. Because let's be honest, if we look now, there are many good school districts out there, but if we look overall at education, public education in this country, it's not that great. It is not that great. There's a lot of issues within public education. Now, I'm not saying homeschooling is perfect. Between public school, private school, and homeschooling, there is no perfect way to educate. There is no perfect system. So in the Axios article, there was a quote at the bottom of the article, and it said basically, bottom line, being able to tailor the education to the individual child is one of the things that is extremely personally persuasive for people to come to homeschool and to stay. Now, to a certain degree, I do agree with that statement. So being able to give your child a completely individualized, tailored to them curriculum and way of being educated is huge. I think one of the frustrating things as a homeschooler is the fact that many times the positives of homeschooling is not acknowledged. And being able to give your child individual one-on-one attention with a tailored to them curriculum is huge. What parent wouldn't want that for their child? And so homeschooling's not for everybody, but what parent wouldn't want your child to get one-on-one attention from the teacher all the time, every day, and not be pulled in 30 different directions with so many kids crammed in a classroom? So after reading these articles and feeling like, homeschoolers are still not understood, this is so frustrating, I want to share the two things that I feel are the big overarching reasons why most families want to homeschool. And the first one is being able to instill values in your children. So as a family, my husband and I, we have certain values that we want to instill in our children. A few off the top of my head are, respecting people, being a hard worker, being a curious learner. And so with homeschooling, especially, I want to instill just a love for learning in my kids. And with homeschooling, I can achieve that so easily. We go on field trips with friends all the time, and we're exploring parks, and, they're digging in the backyard and learning about soil and worms and things like that. And so it's, I want them to be curious. I want them to love learning and not view it as like, oh, I have to go to school. No matter what your values are, parents want to instill those values that they have as a family into their children. And that's why I love that homeschooling has expanded so much, because everyone should have that opportunity, the values that they've developed as a family, to invest in their children in a very hands-on way. And now the second thing that I think is another big overarching reason as to why homeschoolers want to homeschool, that just is not talked about, is the fact that parents want to be hands-on with their children's education. Education is so important. And so to be able to be hands-on with your kids is huge. And so, the article talked about how there was this huge spike in homeschooling during COVID, which I think they kind of understood, but then they were confused as to why they chose to continue homeschooling even after things kind of went back to normal. And what they don't realize is that parents want to be involved. They want to be involved in their children's education. And when they saw, how kids were being educated when they were doing at-home online school, they thought, I think I could do that. I think I could do that. I'm already doing so much with them at home with this, online type of system, that I think I could do this and be okay. And actually, I think I could give my kids more opportunities by educating them in this way. And the schools did not do themselves any favors during the COVID period. That really opened people's eyes to different things that were being taught in school. Now, no matter which side you land on with that, what a lot of parents experienced was that they did not appreciate some of the things being taught. They spoke up and they were treated horribly. And that really, I think, just opened up a lot of people's eyes of, maybe the public school is not the best place for my kids. And maybe I need to be a little more hands-on with their schooling in a very tangible way. And so those are really the two reasons that I feel a lot of homeschoolers fall into one or the other or both as to why, bullying, gun violence in schools and things like that, yes, are considerations, but most of the time we just want to be a part of our children's lives. We want to invest values in them, and we want to be a part of their education. And to be looked at as an enemy by public schools is really pretty shocking when you think about it. So earlier in my video, I told you about how Randi Weingarten had said some pretty shocking things. So she was saying that she was comparing people who wanted school choice to people who wanted segregation in schools. She was referencing post Brown versus Board of Education. So that was shocking to me, because it's like, to want that much control over children and their education is just so power hungry. And to make that comparison, to say that parents who just want to provide a good education for their children, who want the best education possible, are the same as people who wanted segregation in schools decades ago, that is just a shocking comparison. Now, I grew up homeschooling in the 90s, so I've heard a lot about homeschoolers, but I just feel like that was such an irresponsible comparison to make on her end. And if anything, just revealed more about how people in education, and I say that generally, knowing there are lots of great administrators, there are lots of great teachers out there, but that generally in education, the feeling from a homeschooler standpoint is that they resent the fact that you are choosing a different path for education. And there should not be that resentment there. They are there to serve, not to be responsible for your children. You are responsible as a parent for your children. And homeschooling is just such a unique path to take your children, to take your family. So you might be called some things that are just absolutely horrible. You might be treated differently, but at the end of the day, you are showing your kids that it's okay to be different, and it's okay to choose a different path than the status quo. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. And until we meet again next time, I hope that you have an awesome day.